Cutting boards are a great project for both accomplished woodworkers and beginners, but there's 5 things that this professional woodworker wants you to know to start your cutting board project off on the right foot. First is glue selection. Now you might be familiar with regular yellow wood glue. This Titebond product is a great glue for all of your cabinet making projects, but it's not good for cutting boards because it's not waterproof and it's not food safe. Titebond 2 is also a very nice glue, but it's not appropriate for cutting boards because although it is water resistant, it is not food safe. Titebond 3 is the best glue for your cutting board project. It's waterproof, it's food safe, and a lot of woodworkers like the fact that it has a longer open time. But just remember that longer open time also means longer clamping time. Titebond 1 and 2 you might put in the clamps for 45 minutes before running it through your planer. With Titebond 3 you want to give it at least an hour and a half, preferably overnight. Second is wood selection. There are certain woods that are better for cutting boards and certain woods that you really don't want to use. You don't want to use any soft woods and you don't want to use any hardwoods with a very open grain like red oak or white oak. Preferably, you're going to select a hardwood with a closed grain. Here are my 4 favorites: cherry, purple heart, maple, and walnut. I find that this array of woods allows me to get good color contrast, but also the closed pores keep the surface food safe and easy to clean. All right, so now that you've selected the right woods, we need to pay attention to the grain direction on the end grain of the board. This piece of maple is plain sawn. That means that the growth rings on the end grain of the board are parallel with the surface of the wood. This piece of cherry here, you'll notice that the growth rings on the end grain are perpendicular to the surface of the wood. That's called quarter sawn. And then my piece of walnut right here, the growth rings on the end grain are diagonal from the surface of the board. That's called rift sawn. On our finished product, we want the grain on the end grain of our cutting board to be either perpendicular, like on this quarter sawn piece, or diagonal, like on this rift sawn piece. But we're not going to choose these boards to use it. Instead, we'll choose a plain sawn piece, rip it into strips, and then turn it on edge. That way, in our finished product, you can see that all our grain lines are either perpendicular or diagonal, meaning quarter sawn and rift sawn. So when you're selecting your wood for your cutting board, you can either purchase plain sawn wood and rip it into strips to then turn up on edge for your finished cutting board, or you can use scraps from previous projects and clean them up and get them the same width and ready for glue up. That's what I'm going to do right now, and then I'll be able to explain the 4th and possibly most important principle for making cutting boards. I've run my boards through the planer, making them an even thickness, which will make it easier to glue up. The thickness that I mill it to will be the width of the board on my final cutting board. Now I'm going to rip them down to an even width, and the width that I rip it to will determine the cutting board's final thickness. All right, with our boards milled down, I can show you the 4th and most important thing that I want you to know about making cutting boards, and that's to ensure that we have a spring joint. A spring joint is a traditional joint that will make sure that your cutting board lasts. The basic concept is that when we align our boards together, even though we flatten them out, there still will be some cup remaining. We want to align that cup to work in our favor. Basically, we want it to touch on the ends of the board and be open very slightly in the center, so that when we put a clamp in the center and draw that closed, the joint stays closed over time. What I like to do on my cutting boards is to take my straightest board and put that one in the center. And then the cup that remains on the boards on this side will arc towards the center, touching on the ends, and if there's anything open, open in the middle. And then on this side, we'll do the opposite. So that when I draw my joint closed with a clamp, two important things happen. One, every single joint is closed with no gaps, and 2, when I try to move the boards at the end, I can't. The clamping pressure here is transferred all the way to the end, so that when the glue holds it together here, it holds it along the whole joint. Now when I glue it up, I will use 3 clamps. I'll use 2 on the bottom and 1 on the top to make sure that I have opposing pressure. If I tried to pick this up right now, it would fall apart. So with my spring joint all set, I'm going to go ahead and glue up my cutting board using Titebond 3. You go ahead and follow along to the next video where I show you the 5th secret, which is how to get a perfect food-safe finish on your cutting board.